So welcome to early July update for the AI market and all the key players in this phase. So we all know that everyone is talking about Nvidia and also to some degree AMD and Intel. But the kingmaker here is basically Nvidia at this space, or is it? Well, let's have a look. So in my opinion, you should see this as a couple of different segments, maybe three. So on one side of the market is those companies or universities, like smaller players with, like, let's say less R&D money. These players, they cannot afford to build their own hardware, which these like behemoths like Google and let's say Meta, Amazon and Microsoft are able to. And we can see that Google has already done their own TPUs for a couple of generations. I think Meta is also just launching theirs. Amazon has been using to some degree their own Graviton hardware, and Microsoft is rumored, or actually, I mean, Microsoft is going to have their own hardware by 2025 or thereabouts. And so you have those kind of big giant players on one side that, although they have started to buy both from Nvidia mainly, but also AMD and to some degree Intel, but they will still like make their own custom made hardware, because if you have your own set of work that you are very sure how to run, then sure, you can have your own hardware to run it much more efficiently than let's say a more general purpose hardware built from Nvidia and AMD. So there's one side. On the other side, as we said, there's like, let's say the smaller companies with, like, I don't know, like 10 to 50 developers, or a university or a private person. And of course you cannot afford to build your own hardware in the semiconductor market. So for these players, AMD, Nvidia and Intel will be the solutions to go to. And to be honest, other than let's say those big five companies that I mentioned, this part of the market is very important, which is because this is where basically they will decide which frameworks are going to be used. Is it PyTorch? Is it some Nvidia Modulus or any proprietary Nvidia hardware software? Sorry. So yeah, there's that part of the scope of this market, like where is the market heading, and it's very difficult to know, both in terms of hardware with like all these companies and design houses, which is basically Nvidia and AMD, and then you have Intel that, I mean, they're not doing that great right now, but they are at least active in the market, and the chances are that they will turn the ship around, and then you have even more competition. And so it's very difficult to assume that Nvidia will be the leader 3 to 5 years from now. Okay, for the moment they have a head start, and we can actually see that one of the reasons why the Nvidia stock has been running up is simply due to the fact that they had a roughly half a year head start ahead of AMD. So H100 and G200 or H200, I don't know what the other one called, it's roughly half a year ahead of AMD's MI300 series. And this is the reason we see that the explosive growth in Nvidia's market capitalization over the past few weeks or months. Whereas AMD has been, I mean, it's been doing quite well, but nowhere near Nvidia. If you look at the past 6 months, I mean, it's been going from $156 to 400. That's a big jump, like 150%. Whereas AMD has been going up still, especially at the lows of the last year, but going the last 6 months you can see that it's been from 67 to 113. So not even 100%, which again is extremely good return, but compared to Nvidia, yeah, it just pales in comparison. But this gives you basically the opportunity to invest in AMD for a cheaper valuation, in my opinion, compared to Nvidia, if they manage to execute on their project timelines. So yeah, so this is the first part of the video where we looked at the players and what kind of market dynamics there are there. So let's go to the second part. So in the previous segment of the video we talked about the dynamic of the market and the players active in this market. So now, starting with Nvidia. We know that Nvidia currently enjoys a really good head start on AMD, as well as for example other companies like Google enjoys a head start in their own hardware compared to, let's say, main competitors like Microsoft and AWS. So things will in my opinion, rapidly change both for those underdogs in these markets, which would be Meta, or previously known Facebook, and then AMD, which will soon start to have their own offerings as well. And there's a problem with Nvidia in this, because although their strength is of course good hardware but extremely competitive software, we can see that PyTorch, which is a more let's say open source model for machine learning, has been gaining a lot of market share and traction everywhere. A lot of research papers are basically mentioning and talking about PyTorch, and everyone, I mean, I'm not an expert in this software side, but wherever I look at it and look at what the experts say, to me it looks like yeah, people really have a good opinion on PyTorch. But again, as you can see, this is a very dynamic market, and things can change. Maybe there's another framework coming 1 year from now that will do to PyTorch what PyTorch did to the other stuff. So yeah, we don't know, but as of right now, there seems to be a movement towards PyTorch, which I believe was started by multiple companies, but also I think mainly it was like Meta that developed it. So yeah, this lays the foundation for let's say other hardware to be competitive against Nvidia. And we can see that also there's other problems that could possibly be a trouble for Nvidia, and this is more a geopolitical view, and I could say that yeah, the risk between escalation of Chinese and American relations, I think this is far worse for Nvidia than AMD, although AMD is also exposed to China quite a bit, but for Nvidia it's much more painful. And we can actually see that the way the CEO Jensen Huang speaks, he really doesn't like this whole fighting between China and USA. So there's also that part to look at. So going from Nvidia to AMD, and we can see that the main important news here is actually their coming earnings, and actually not the results in that earnings from March to June, but rather the guidance that they will give for the second half, probably most likely for the Q4, but maybe, I don't know, maybe we could see something for Q3 as well. Now, in my opinion, the main reason why we saw that big jump in Nvidia a couple of weeks ago, 4 or 5 weeks ago, is the reason that they gave the guidance for Q3. And they basically are saying that they will have a giant jump in data center revenue with really fat, juicy margins. I believe the same dynamics could happen to AMD, because we know that AMD's MI300 will be launched this year, but that's like roughly 6 months after Nvidia. So the reason we didn't see as big of jump on AMD side is simply because their product hasn't launched yet. So MI300 will be competitive, especially in some special instances and workloads that I think like it's much more competitive than Nvidia also in some of those specific workloads. So there is no reason why this product shouldn't sell. And going from the fact that we know that Nvidia is marking up the hardware they are saying right now for like 5 to 6 times, and they are enjoying margins of, some even say upwards 90 to 85%, I think like a lot of customers are eager to see an alternative to Nvidia. And even though that I don't expect that AMD will go here and take 50% market share in 1 week or 1 quarter, of course not. Even if they manage to take, let's say, 10 to 15% with MI300, this will like be absolute humongous numbers for AMD. So that's one of the parts that I think that it's very important, if you believe in this company, to position yourself in the coming weeks. Now, we also saw that the price target was increased from the analyst Gus Richard for AMD, and they increased their price target from I think somewhere around $80 to $150. And they are also of course saying that they were wrong previously, and they will look to change that, and especially given that AMD will have a sort of AI multiple or AI premium on the stock price. And yeah, having a look at the stock price, we can see that it's been recovering since the downtrend last year. I think it went all the way down to 50, and now it's like above 100, and it's been basically going back and forth between 100 to 120. So yeah, it's quite interesting that a lot of analysts are increasing their price targets. And also the very interesting part here is that, as we said, on the hardware side, MI300 deliveries will begin late this year, and it will power the second exascale supercomputer El Capitan, which will be the fastest supercomputer on the planet. So, and I think I saw on the news that MI300 sampling has already started last week for specific customers, you could say. We've also know that Microsoft is actually have an interest to bet a bit on AMD compared to Nvidia, just to not allow Nvidia get away with things, but also because MI200 is really performing really good. And we could see that the news last week that basically they managed to get MI200 and MI250 to perform almost 80 to 85% as much as the H100 on Nvidia. So yeah, things, I mean, you could say that if these older generation products are performing so good, how good would the MI300 be? So I'm really eager to see the performance numbers for MI300. As we said, this is a 3-horse race on the hardware front, mainly. So Intel, another interesting player. Sadly for Intel, it's actually quite difficult. We know that Oracle actually, their CEO was literally bragging about how they're gonna invest something like $3 billion on hardware from Nvidia. And also interestingly, they actually said that they will spend something like 3 times more than that on hardware from AMD and Ampere. Ampere is a, I think, ARM x64 CPU manufacturer. It's a really interesting small company also that should be on this list. But again, we cannot look at every single player. So yeah, Oracle is basically saying that they're abandoning Intel to some degree and choosing AMD, Nvidia and Ampere. So not good news for Intel, at least. We also know that Sapphire Rapids still seems to have more troubles. I mean, it launched at least 18 months, 2 years later than expected. And now that we could just see from the rumors from Moore's Law is Dead, which is a computer hardware analysis, I would say. And according to his sources, is that Sapphire Rapids faces another delay in since they have shipment issues due to firmware issues. So not looking good for Sapphire Rapids. And even if there wouldn't be any issues, on most of the workloads, AMD's Genoa and Genoa X is simply the better product. So yeah, not good news for Intel. But on the good side for Intel, the stock price seems to have had some rebound to some degree. And again, I've said this in previous videos. Some of the best opportunities in the stock market you're actually getting where everything looks really bad. And I believe that the difference between Intel's manufacturing now compared to Taiwan Semiconductor, which enables Nvidia and AMD, the difference there is not as much as it could have been a couple of years ago. There seems to get some kind of traction in their manufacturing side. So still we have to look at it into more details, but I believe there are some good rumors that are coming out of Intel with the new 7nm and even 2 and 3 nanometer processors that could possibly turn the ship around. So I haven't given up on Intel yet. I'm just saying that there's big risk still, but the stock price seems to have rebounded a bit, at least compared to a few months back. So let me start the final part of the video with a question for you. Who do you think will be the winner? Pause the video and think about it for a few moments. In my opinion, the winner in this space will be decided by the ecosystem on the software side and those companies on the hardware side that are adapting quickly and will be able to offer solutions on a hardware basis and software basis that the customers are happy with. So in this video on the segment with Intel, I spoke about, for example, Oracle leaving Intel for AMD, right? So that gives you a hint that customers are not happy with Intel's solution at this moment. So you wouldn't basically rush to the market and purchase Intel stock reading those news. That doesn't give you confidence in Intel, right? Now there's other interesting parts to this dynamic. Of course, in the beginning of the video we spoke about how Nvidia is dominating right now. But also, if they have like something like 90% of the accelerator market right now, there is a ton of market share to be gained for the competition. And we know that they are selling their hardware extremely expensively. So there's a lot of incentives for the customers out there to purchase, for example, AMD's MI300 by end of the year. And if you follow the right people on Twitter and in the semiconductor community or in LinkedIn, you can see that there are signs to be seen there that AMD is actually getting traction with MI300. So there's also that interesting part of the market. So the customers are really the kingmakers in my opinion. And also, if we go in from a software point of view, we know that PyTorch is gaining quite a lot of traction, and there's a lot of interesting big players behind PyTorch and other frameworks that will be possible to run on AMD hardware, for example. And speaking of AMD, most people forget that when it comes to AI, we are really talking about like GPU accelerators a lot. But you have to remember that the general purpose CPUs that AMD are making, so the EPIC series, they will also have something called XDNA into those CPUs. And XDNA is the, let's say, the hardware part that AMD involves in the new CPU lineup from the purchase of Xilinx in 2021. And additionally, they will also have this DPU configuration from Pensando that they purchased last year. So in my opinion, there is absolutely no basically doubts about that AMD has the best portfolio here out of all these companies. And in my opinion, it's just a no-brainer. But again, this is not investment advice. This is just me as an amateur sharing my ideas with you. So thank you for watching this long video, and if possible, please make sure to like the video and subscribe. See you in the next one.